This week on the Brody File, hey, look who we found. It's New Jersey Governor Chris Christie. We sit down with the possible presidential candidate. Some call him a moderate, but conservatives loved him at this year's CPAC conference.
We have a lot in common in terms of what my record has been, and so I felt the reception was great, and I look forward to coming back next year if I'm invited.
Also, CBS reporter Cheryl Atkinson leaves the network. Inquiry minds want to know if it was because of her rabid interest in the Benghazi story. We talked to her in the past, and so we open up the Brody File video vault searching for answers.
And there hasn't been an appetite for the stories I've offered on Benghazi.
Plus, can Rand Paul win the presidency? The Brody File on across America. Let's go. And welcome everybody to another edition of the Brody File. We're here in D.C. And by the way, did you know bologna is the official food of Washington, D.C.? It is in full supply. All right, we begin this week with Governor Chris Christie. He may run for president, but is he conservative enough for the base of the Republican Party? Well, he spoke at the conservative CPAC conference, and he actually got a pretty good reception. Check out the Brody File applause meter.
All right.
Well, right after Christie's speech, the Brody File went into full political stalking mode, and we found the governor. That's right, he sat with us for an interview. Now, he could be the frontrunner for the GOP if he runs for president, but he has some convincing to do because the base is a bit skeptical of him ever since he gave President Obama some abundant love during Superstorm Sandy last year. Here's the governor. Look, you just said right out there that the media loves to define us, conservatives. I mean, so tell me a little bit about, they've been trying to define you. Here you are with this strong conservative record, and yet it's the moderate Chris Christie and all. I mean, what do you make of all of this?
Yeah, well, I think it's when they see you get votes from folks in a blue state, like we got 61% of the vote last November, and 51% of the Hispanic vote, 21% of the African American vote, they say, well, you can't possibly be conservative. They just look at the record. We've cut spending, we've cut taxes, 6,000 fewer state employees, reformed pensions and benefits. These are all things that conservatives stand for, while at the same time being the first pro-life governor since Roe versus Wade in New Jersey, which they said no one pro-life could ever get elected statewide in New Jersey. This is the media continuing to try to put forward a myth. And so we're just going to continue to talk about our record and let people know that if conservatives talk about what we're for, people listen and they vote for us. When we talk all the time about what we're against, they block us out.
Tell me a little bit about what you felt like on stage out there in front of the CPAC crowd, and what was that like? It
was great. Listen, I think, I spoke in Chicago at CPAC in 2012 and got a wonderful reception out there and felt like the audience today was great. Listen, these are really strong, committed folks who believe that our country and our states individually need to go in a different direction. And I agree. And so, we have a lot in common in terms of what my record has been. And so I felt the reception was great, and I look forward to coming back next year if I'm invited. This
President Obama, you had some harsh words out there for him. I mean, what is the grade for this guy? I mean, is it a D, a D plus, a D minus? Where does he fit exactly?
Well, I would say it's incomplete, because a grade, you've accomplished something that you can then grade. He hasn't. And my biggest problem with the president has always been, from the beginning through to today, is that he's AWOL on the issue of leadership. And I don't care what the topic is. This is someone who avoids taking charge of the situation. And to me, that's the exact opposite of the personality you need to have if you're going to be an effective president. You don't have to dabble in every little issue, but you've got to say, here's where I stand, and I'm willing to stand and fight on these issues and drag people in to bring them together. This president does none of that. So I would give him a really bad incomplete, because you can't give somebody a grade when they've done nothing.
Look, you're a straight shooter, and you know the deal. 2014 midterm elections, many of these midterm elections, Republicans do well, and then all of a sudden they blow it in the 2016, 2012 and beyond. So how do they get to a place where they can not just do well in midterms, but really kind of capture that White House?
Well, first of all, as I said before, we have to say what we're for. Our ideas are better than their ideas. And if we put them forward in an unapologetic, straight way, we can do it. But also, we've got to go into places and campaign in places where we're uncomfortable. We can't just keep going to the Chamber of Commerce luncheons, and we can't just keep coming to CPAC. We've got to go into Latino neighborhoods. We have to go into African American neighborhoods. You know, my percentage of the vote among the African American community in New Jersey went from 7% in 2009 to 21% in 2013. I had a woman who came up to me in Orange to say hello, a predominantly African American city in our state when I was campaigning for re-election. A reporter asked her afterwards, "Who are you voting for?" She said, "I'm voting for the governor." I said, "Why?" She goes, "Because he was the first Republican I've ever seen walk down the street, and I've lived here my whole life." You know, we need to show up, we need to be respectful and listen, and then we need to talk about our ideas and why they'll make their lives better. And that's the way we're going to win national elections. We cannot win national elections without getting a greater percentage of the vote from independents, from Hispanics, from African Americans. That's what we need to do in this country. And the good news is that our ideas will be accepted by those folks, but we need to go there and campaign and listen.
Looking into the future a little bit in terms of 2016, where you're at, and more specifically, let me talk about something else about looking into the future, the Mets. How are they going to do this year without Matt Harvey? First, the 2016 question, but then the more important question, the Met question.
Well, 2016, I think, is only going to be possible for anybody if we do well in 2014. We've got to re-elect Republican governors, which is going to be my focus all through the year as chairman of the Republican Governors Association. We've got to take back the United States Senate and keep the House and create a foundation for a strong national campaign in 2016. And I think there's lots of good people out there who could run and could be good candidates, but they're not going to be good candidates if we don't get the job done in 2014. On the Mets, listen.
I know you're a huge Mets fan.
I'm a huge Mets fan. I was, before I became governor, I had been a season ticket holder for a decade before that. I will just tell you that we'll be better this year, I think, but I don't think we're quite there. I think 2015 is probably our year. I think we'll do much better in 15 than 14.
That is Chris Christie on the Brody File. By the way, Christie did okay in the CPAC straw poll. It's a presidential poll. But when conservatives were asked who they want as their presidential nominee, Senator Rand Paul was the runaway winner, and we have the results for you. Rand Paul wins 31%. Ted Cruz, a distant second, 11%. Dr. Ben Carson, 9%, and then Christie at 8%. Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker, former Pennsylvania Senator Rick Santorum, both tying for 5th place with 7%. Marco Rubio had just 6%, and then Paul Ryan and Rick Perry were at 3%, and rounding out the, quote, bottom were Bobby Jindal and Mike Huckabee, both at 2%. Now, as for the winner, Rand Paul, well, he seems to be appealing to the base because he's preaching against the status quo.
Imagine a time when the White House is once again occupied by a friend of liberty. And you may think I'm talking about electing Republicans. I'm not. I'm talking about electing lovers of liberty. There is a great and tumultuous battle underway for the future, not of the Republican Party, but the future of the entire country.
And then there's the Mama Grizzly, Sarah Palin. You know, she's probably not running for president, newsflash, but she sure knows how to keep the crowd entertained.
I do not like this Uncle Sam. I do not like his healthcare scam. I do not like this spying, man. I do not like, oh yes we can.
Sarah Palin, never a dull moment. All right, coming next, President Obama and fatherhood. How the Obama administration is pushing a new initiative that could help turn around families. We're back in a moment. And welcome back to Little House on the Prairie. Actually, no, it's the Brody File. All right, well, look, President Obama takes plenty of shots from conservatives, but you know, can we give this president a little bit of credit? I mean, his administration is trying to use the bully pulpit of the presidency to bring attention and awareness to fatherless homes, especially in the minority communities. And you know who's on top of this story? That's right, get ready to dance. I'll do a little, oh, better not. Jenny and the B-Block.
You go, girl!
This week, Jenny takes a closer look at the president's initiative called My Brother's Keeper.
When Chicago high school student Christian Champagne learned about a program called BAM, a name that stands for Becoming a Man, he tried it because once a week it got him out of geometry class. But what started as an excuse changed his life.
A year ago, I was closed off. Like, I don't care about people. I care about myself. But now I can like have a conversation. You know, gives me confidence and like a boost to my self-esteem, and helps me open up about what's going on in my life and how I feel that day.
Like too many men of color, Champagne's father is rarely around, and boys without dads are much more likely to be poor and fail at school.
Your dad is like the #1 goal of that standard of how to be a man and how to handle your business like a man.
Thursday, he introduced another man who grew up without his dad, the President of the United States.
I could see myself in these young men. And the only difference is that I grew up in an environment that was a little bit more forgiving. So when I made a mistake, the consequences were not as severe.
So the president is launching My Brother's Keeper, a new initiative to encourage more programs like BAM that keep minority men on track by helping them mature emotionally and set worthwhile goals. Instead of tax dollars, private foundations are investing hundreds of millions of dollars to find out which strategies work. Despite being the nation's first African-American president, Mr. Obama rarely targets programs to specific groups. But in this case, he says, unlocking the full potential of young Black and Latino men will eventually benefit all Americans.
In this country, we have a responsibility to help each other. And so when we see people who are mired in these horrible environments, we all have to stand up and do something.
For young men like Champagne and Karan Turner, having a man, especially the president, take an interest in their lives means everything.
He wants us to live up to our full potential, and he knows that we can do better, and he wants us to strive for more.
For the Brody File, I'm Jennifer Jenny and the B Block Wishon at the White House.
Well, hopefully some lives will change because of this program. All right, we're back in a moment with an evangelical flash mob. Atheists, run for your lives. Back in a moment. And welcome back to the Brody File, where politics for faith, I mean, where else can you find a show that mixes those two? That means it's time to check in with Brody File producer Tracy Winborn. But around here, we like to call her the church lady.
David, people just can't get enough of Duck Dynasty these days. You hear the name Phil Robertson a lot. He's been in the news for his support of traditional marriage. Well, how would you like to be baptized by him? This guy, Brian Richards, he's a huge Duck Dynasty fan. He drove 20 hours just to be baptized by Robertson. He made the 1,300-mile journey from his home in New Jersey to Robertson's church in West Monroe, Louisiana.
Good news, you know. Amen. Oh, you know, was I baptized in the name of Jesus, man? For the remission of your sins, and God's going to seal the deal with the Holy Spirit. You got it? You got it. Here we go.
Now, I wonder if baptisms by Robertson are open to everyone. Look up Ferry Road Church of Christ in Monroe, Louisiana. Give it a shot. Now to a story about the Skit Guys. These two guys have been best friends since high school. They were always the wise guys in class, you know the type. Anyway, now they teach God's Word through comedy, and they have put together a little piece called The Skinny on Fasting.
I think fasting's awesome. I mean, where else can you combine spirituality and dieting all in the same way? I mean, I fast. Okay, that's a total lie. I don't even fast at all.
Now, David, here's a story I picked just for you. And it's about a surprise gospel flash mob in Birmingham, Alabama. Grammy award-winning artist Hezekiah Walker led a flash mob with his hit song, Every Praise is to Our God.
Let me hear the worshipers! Where's all of my praises?
Now, David, I would actually like to see the Brody File in a flash mob someday. We're going to have to work on that. That's all for the church lady. Back to you.
Tracy, we will try an evangelical flash mob. That's dangerous. Coming up, the reporter whose stories are known for being critical of President Obama, why she's resigning from CBS. Back in a moment. And welcome back to the Brody File. Well, look, conservatives call her courageous, passionate, a true champion. They're not talking about Miley Cyrus. No, they are heaping those accolades on CBS reporter Cheryl Atkinson. Actually, she's now former CBS reporter Cheryl Atkinson because she resigned this week after being unable to come to a contract agreement with the network. Look, she's grown frustrated with CBS because she can't get many of her explosive stories on what happened in Benghazi on the air. Now, those stories have been critical of the Obama administration. Well, look, we talked to Atkinson about all of this a few months ago. She was very frustrated back then with not being able to get some of these Benghazi stories on the air. So, as we do from time to time, let's dip into the Brody File video vault and search for that Cheryl Atkinson interview. Look, the conservatives, you know what's going on, and they're giving you awards, they love you, the whole, it's interesting. It's like they're ready to put you like as a Heritage Foundation fellow, or you're going to speak at CPAC all of a sudden, not that you are. But what has been your reaction to all of the attention that you've received from these conservative groups? It's kind of somewhat of maybe an awkward situation for you.
I don't mind it at all. I appreciate it. Maybe not everything that's being said about me is entirely true or my reporting, but I appreciate that there are people supporting the coverage that I give. Some years ago, it was the opposite. Some liberals were embracing me and the conservatives were attacking me. I still have clips from the time, the media critics on the conservative side. At that point, when I was doing stories, because we had a Republican administration, so the stories were perceived when I do watchdog type things as harmful or critical of the Republican administration, so it was presumed I was liberal. I'm actually, as I like to say, politically agnostic. If you conclude because I investigate a story and it happens to lead one way or the other, and I'm persistent, if you want to conclude that's where I stand politically, you're free to do that. I can just tell you it's not the case. I came from a great journalism college, University of Florida, and we were strictly trained in how to keep your opinions out of your pieces. And one of my favorite intellectual challenges over time has been to try to cover a news story that maybe I personally feel differently about than a viewpoint being reasonably expressed in the story, but I'm able to present it in a convincing and fair way, and that nobody's able to really, if they guess how I feel, they might be wrong, they might be right, but it won't be on the basis of because I've inserted my feelings in the story.
I understand you're not in the business of criticizing your colleagues, and I know the media is now picking up the Benghazi, mainstream media is picking up Benghazi in a big-time way, but you were on the forefront of all of this early on. Do you believe that the media overall, writ large, has kind of missed the boat, or at least missed the boat to begin with initially on this?
Well, there have been media covering it, so it's not as though I'm completely by myself. But I do think this, and I've observed this with many stories over the years in different administrations, the media is not always consistent in the vigor that they use to pursue a given topic. And I never quite understand, why the difference, because I think that if something is important when one administration is in office, then an equal thing should be treated equally when another administration is in office. And I don't see that's always the case. And I do think the media did not use the opportunity in the weeks and months after Benghazi to be as persistent and as pointed as they should have, considering the importance of the issue. In my view, after independently looking at the facts, I just think you can't walk away and conclude anything other than it's an extremely important story with many unanswered questions and contradictions. And I think some in the media were not as curious as I think naturally journalists ought to be.
Let me ask you a relatively sensitive question, but CBS and how they have seen you cover this story, has there been some pushback from CBS, and if so, kind of what form has that manifested in?
Not really. I mean, I would say two things about that. I've received a lot of encouragement from the top executives who I consider Jeff Fager, who's our CEO, and David Rhodes, who's our president, have certainly never said anything to try to interfere with the coverage. They've complimented a lot of my work and strongly supported it. On the other hand, every story that you present as a reporter has to be bought by a broadcast, meaning not purchased for money, but you have to get them interested in it. So maybe Evening News wants one story, Morning News wants a story. And there hasn't been an appetite for the stories I've offered on Benghazi. So I've published a lot online because there's unlimited content space online, and I've done a lot of my reporting there. And until recently, there hasn't been, as you said, much of a market for on the air, and that's for a variety of reasons I can't speak to. I don't know what all the decision making involves, except that on a given day, there's a finite amount of time to put stories on, and there are plenty of stories happening every day that obviously someone's judging to be more important or more urgent.
Has that been a frustration for you to not be able to get these stories out more in different venues?
Everybody wants their stories on as much as possible, and this is not the first or the last story that I'll be doing that, you know, I differ with some of my colleagues as to its importance and how much prominence. It's sort of the story of my life, in fact, is I'm always pushing stories a little bit off the beaten path of what everybody else wants to do, and I understand that maybe that's kind of why I'm interested in them in some respects, and I do fight those battles. I kind of enjoy the fight. I'm more successful more often than not, but I'm certainly not always successful in pushing what I think is an important story.
A Video Vault exclusive with Cheryl Atkinson here on the Brody File. By the way, she is currently at work on a book tentatively titled Stonewalled: One Reporter's Fight for Truth in Obama's Washington. You think that's going to be a hit with conservatives? Oh, mark it down. Back in a moment with an Oy Vey moment of the week that's going to make you feel down and out. And welcome back to the show, everybody. Look, do you ever get that sinking feeling, you know, just something's not exactly right? Well, we saw that transpire on live television, and it's this week's Oy Vey moment of the week. All right, well, look, we want you to watch this reporter from the BBC in England. This is what happens when cameras aren't controlled by people, but rather by computers. Have a look.
Mr. Hardwick defends the spend of public money, and he says he would like now to draw a line under this and move on. In a statement, the panel said it welcomed the apology, but said some of the financial costs could have been avoided.
Caroline, thank you. I think we had a problem with their camera there at the end.
All right, let's watch it again just to have a laugh. There she goes into the liberal mainstream media abyss. Just kidding, just kidding. I am sure she is a swell person. But the good news is that something like that just never happens around here, I think. Anyhow, that does it until next time. God bless. Have a great week.